must remember this. A kiss is still a kiss. A sigh is just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. And when two lovers woo, they still say, I love you. On that you can rely. No matter what the future brings as time goes by.
Moonlight and love songs never out of date. Hearts full of passion and jealousy and hate. Woman needs man and man must have his mate that no man can deny.
It's still the same old story. A fight for love and glory. A case of do or die. The world will always welcome lovers as time goes by.
We're chatting with Mid-America Music Hall of Famer Morris Dunow about his distinguished musical career. May I call you Maury?
Sure, yes.
Well, we know you from bands like the Palatins and, of course, the Chancellors, but there was one specific tune that really was a total game changer for you guys, and that was Little Latin Lupe Lu.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Okay, my brief time with the Chancellors, who were inducted in the Mid-America Hall of Fame, Music Hall of Fame, I was the third tier, and I just happened to know the drummer who was a third tier member of that. 16 of us went through that five-piece group. There was no loyalty in bands. Getting back to that tune, it was a cover tune of the Righteous Brothers, and we just happened to get lucky with it. There were two major recording studios in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, K-Bank Studios and Soma Records, which is Amos spelled backwards. Amos and his brother Dan had Musicland, which was retail music stores, but they also had a recording studio. The Chancellors recorded it way before I was involved with them in '64, and it became a hit. And eventually, through the course of people coming and going in bands, I got in on the waning side of the group. But prior to that, on a more important note, in terms of rural musicians and what we could add to groups in the Twin Cities, that was a blessing in disguise. You didn't know it. We were kids. But in outstate Minnesota, there were different towns that somebody had, whether they were a radio DJ or somebody had a recording studio and knew something about recording. And that's when we came about, and the Palatins recorded and designed and named our own label, Scavenger Records.
Wow.
Yeah. So later, being just a few years ago, there was this outfit out of Chicago called Numero Records, and they were specializing in instrumental music, exotica instrumental music of early rock groups, right? And Palatins were one group out of 54 that were selected. For our one instrumental, one hit wonder jungle guitar.
Was it like a talent contest, or like America's Got Talent, or how do you get discovered? How do you get chosen to be a part of it?
I don't know. I guess the guy heard us at the Long Prairie County Fair or someplace and wanted to know whether we wanted to make a record.
That's a silly question, isn't it?
A 45, yeah. So and we did, and it was fun. The original Palatins.
Were you nervous?
No,
I mean,
well, it was unique. I don't think I was nervous as far as, the jitters, but we did it. There were, one side was Love Angel, which is vocal and
Love
jungle
Angel.
guitar. Yeah.
Huh, that sounds good.
Yeah, written by Freddie Dean, and then jungle guitar was Jim Bachman on lead guitar. Basically, it was sort of modeled after Martin Denny's Quiet Village when you talk about instrumental groups.
Right. Did you write your own material? Or did you record other stuff?
No, we just kind of copied stuff. We covered.
You never tried to be a songwriter?
Love Angel
or-
was original, but other than that,
Okay,
no.
all right. Give us an idea of the era that we're talking about. What was the year?
Well, the early rock and roll in rural Minnesota could span from 1959 to probably 1963, 64
Okay.
era.
And there were a lot of great bands that came out of the Twin Cities. I mean, you had the Castaways, the High Spirits, I love that name,
Yeah.
and the Trashmen too, right?
Yeah, yep. Surfing Bird, Castaways, Liar Liar, Pants on Fire. And a bunch of other groups that kind of came and went. Some had stability, played in the club circuit, and others, came and went. But there wasn't any loyalty,
Well, that's like today. I mean, there's a revolving door of musicians.
Yeah.
I mean, people get with different groups or they leave the business altogether.
Right. Yeah, and that was the case with early rock and roll. Maybe the original person was the leader of the pack, but in the case of the Palatins, and we had to change the name to avoid any kind of lawsuit. Fortunately, Freddie Dean, the leader of the group, knew ahead of time, or somebody told him that in order to avoid any litigation, to change the last spelling from Paladin to Palatins, because there was a
There was
country
a TV
western
show
TV
that was
the Paladin,
Paladin, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Twin Cities was a hotbed of rock and roll in the 60s. Much like later on in the course of life, other towns became big hits as far as groups and group names. And a lot of the groups changed their names. If you were maybe the leader of the pack, so to speak, of the group, you kept the initial name. But it wasn't uncommon for bands to change their names.
Sure.
And we copied a lot of music, it's important to know. Music really from the southern states, early blues, early country music. A lot of bands were impacted by that style of music.
I was just going to say, describe for us how these rural bands were impacted by that new music sound, if you will, that was coming along in the early 50s and 60s.
Correct. It was deemed rock and roll, and we were just part of that whole scene in the late 50s, early 60s, as far as being in a band, being lucky, and getting invited to play in a group. But we were impacted by music of the 30s and 40s and 50s, country music, bluegrass music, to name a few, skiffle music.
And what is that?
It is a funny term, but it's basically a blend of, folk, blues, jazz. Some people call it hillbilly music because people would play any instrument, any accoutrements they had, spoons,
Or a jug?
a jug, a lot of stuff came down from mountain music, that kind of thing. But
Sure.
anyway, so we were impacted by all these styles of music, and then there was this element called race records. Race records came way before we did in terms of bands listening to stuff and covering tunes that, say, like Little Richard, who did Tutti Frutti. Under race records, it really never went anywhere because segregation existed then. A lot of those records were not played on white radio stations, as you would probably know. So Pat Boone covered Tutti Frutti and made a big hit.
Wow.
Right? There was this group in the Twin Cities you were mentioning before, along with the Chancellors, the Underbeats, and other groups such as the Trashmen, Castaways, a group called the High Spirits. And they covered an old Bobby Blue Bland blues tune called Turn On Your Love Light. A bunch of white boys in the Twin Cities that made a big hit regionally.
Well, what kind of venues did you play?
The early rock and roll venues were pretty much open to what was available in a given town. That would be ballrooms, county fairs played a good part, roadhouse juke joints. Our first gig as the Palatins was at this fish camp in Osakis, Minnesota, a small little town, at a place called Barefoot Louie's.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, Barefoot Louie's. Basically, it was a roller rink. And the seating when we played, because rock and roll was a novelty thing then, was hay bales, The roller rink floor was the dance floor, and he would put some sand or salt down, not sand, salt or whatever, so people could dance on it. The stage was a makeshift stage of planks supported by cinder block bricks. Large enough space for my drum tom-tom stand to fall through.
That's not good.
I know. The band kept playing. Typical.
Vamp till ready. Yeah.
Chattanooga Shoeshine Boy. Chattanooga Shoeshine Boy was a famous tune, again, a cover tune. But I chased this drum down on the floor that was rolling around to pick it up, and the band kept playing. Well, everyone thought it was a novelty act.
Part of the act?
Yeah.
To have your drum go rolling across the floor.
So we went along with it.
So you had to keep doing that then?
No, not really, depending on where you played. But we did the song, but not the drum rolling around.
Well, what other key things played a role in your musical development before you got to the Twin Cities?
Old-time music, polka bands. I played in polka bands. The bass player in our rock band's his brother had a polka band. And so you're in these elements of ballrooms again, because that was out there. And one night you may have an orchestra that's out on tour. One night you may have an old time band playing an accordion trio. That's where you learn to yodel, by the way. We would play at whatever space was available. Juke joint, county fairs, as an example, were another great outlet and opportunity for bands to play at during a county fair out in outstate Minnesota, rural areas, because every county fair had its own little nuances of what was important.
Sure.
Of course, you had the grandstand event going on with race cars, stock car races. Under the grandstand were usually sponsor booths, and we would play our first gig, one of our first gigs to introduce us to Douglas County Fair in Alexandria, Minnesota.
That's a big one.
Well, it was county seat. We were in the Carlson Music booth, sponsor booth down below the grandstand, and one of the local dairies provided chocolate milk for us. And one of the first tunes that I sang was this rockabilly tune from this outfit out of Richmond, Virginia, called the Rocketines. Was called Woo-hoo, Woo-hoo, and that was it. Didn't have to memorize any lyrics.
That's
right?
for sure.
And,
That's an easy one.
Oh yeah, that was good. And so that just kind of evolved from there. And Freddie Dean, the leader of the group, was initially booking us. We didn't go through agents. We didn't have agents. They were kind of unheard of. Basically, it was word of mouth.
How did you're a teacher now, are you not, or you were?
I was.
How did you seg into that? How did you seg into education from being a performer?
Well, I guess maybe hindsight, but listen to the mom and dad about, you gotta get a day job, you know, you might as well go to school and get, and teach music, right? So I did. And that's how that happened inadvertently again through 40-some years of teaching.
Do you regret not staying with your passion?
Well, I did, but not full-time.
Okay.
I mean, I've always been a club musician throughout my life, which is a good extension of who I am, right? In different forms, whether it's a jazz drummer, a vocalist, playing keyboards, being in the horn section.
Didn't all you guys have to play all the instruments?
Well, that's
almost
the neat
to
thing.
be at least adequate on more than one instrument to record.
Yeah. That was a neat thing that rural musicians could bring when they went to the big city. They were they weren't just one-dimensional. They could play different instruments, different styles of music, based on, like in my case, I played in polka bands and accordion trios.
You play the accordion?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
But I played drums, but I learned how to yodel from the accordion player.
Will you humor us? You knew I was going to
Oh
ask.
my God!
Yes,
you're pulling
just
my
a
chain.
little, just a little.
There you go, folks.
That's it. Swiss Miss Coco.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That was great.
Well, yodeling is a really
That is
important
an art,
means of
and
communication.
over in a certain section of
Yeah.
the world, a very respected art.
Yep.
I mean, they have contests and everything.
They have contests. In the county fair issues, it was not uncommon for bands to be playing outside on a stage, if you weren't in the grandstand, to showcase your wares in between a stock car race going on, a pig calling, or a greased pig contest.
So there was a whole bunch of stuff
Yeah.
going on, and you played, you sang,
A
you
yodeling contest.
yodeled.
Yeah.
And isn't there? There's pig calling too. I
Yeah.
mean, they're all kind of related in that guttural, glottal sound
Yeah.
in the throat, right?
Yeah, I think of greased pigs, like and they were in the animal rights groups back in the day, but it was not uncommon for a pig calling contest. Pig, pig, pig!
Oh, you could do that too.
Well, you had to kind of.
Multi-talented.
I mean, realize we're from farm.
You're
communities.
country boys.
Yeah, we
Sure.
were country boys. Greased pigs. That was another kind of a funny comical relief thing. I always remember Paul Newman in the movie HUD, I think it was.
Okay.
There was a segment there where they had a greased pig contest.
What's the idea? You grease the pigs and then you
Yeah.
let them run, or?
Well, you catch one and then you win the prize.
Oh, I see. And you can't catch them because they're greased down.
Yeah.
Ah, see, I'm not well versed on country
No.
antics.
Well, see, that was part of it. But yodeling was vital because most people in rural Minnesota were Scandinavian,
Oh, okay, sure.
Norwegian, and Switzerland and stuff. And like we were talking about, it was a common way of communicating in the mountains and the Alps.
Wow.
Yodeling back and forth from different towns and
I
stuff
did not know
on
that.
cross-country skis. It's
Did
an
you guys go out
occupation.
on the road?
Out on the road for us in rural Minnesota was weekends traveling to different juke joints,
Within the state, though.
ballrooms, yeah.
Okay, you never really left Minnesota.
No, we didn't have an agent, so we never were at the mercy of going to Canada or the
Canada
South.
would have been fun.
Yeah, well,
Back in those days.
we were only 400 miles to the Winnipeg. Out on the grounds, there was also there were stages outside for bands also could play. A rockabilly band, bluegrass band, a rock and roll band, to introduce themselves to an audience, which they probably wouldn't get to be able to do if they were playing elsewhere.
Were you influenced by any instrumental groups?
Many. Our bands, because oftentimes after midnight coming back from a gig, 2 or 3 in the morning,
You turn on the radio, wouldn't
yeah, the radio's on, there's no interference, Wolfman Jack show was on, but instrumental groups were vital for us. There were the Ventures, for instance, Bill Doggett, Dave Baby Cortez, a group called the Champs. I could go on and on and on. But Dwayne Eddy, for instance, we were really impacted by these groups, and it gave the singer in a band a little break too. If you had someone in the band that could play these tunes, fortunately, like early country music, most of the songs were 3 chords.
Right.
Right, and they were vocal driven. That's a similar theme before, where boy meets girl, you break up, kind of thing.
Those are life themes. Still pertinent today, right?
Yeah, they are.
Well, now, for those people that are unfamiliar with the genre, talk to us a little bit about rockabilly. And then we can also cover the early days of rock and roll, too.
Oh, sure. Rockabilly stemmed from the earlier music forms I was talking about in terms of bluegrass music, and then how instruments changed. From rockabilly was more electronic instruments and drums and a vocalist. Prior to that, it was bluegrass music with no drummer. The drum beat maybe was a slap bass pattern by the bass player,
Sure.
and so there was no electronic instruments per se with bluegrass music. Skiffle music then became like rockabilly music, a little more popular with the new invention of electronic instruments.
Oh, sure.
And
Changed
it's-
everything. didn't it?
Yeah, it's important to know that if your local music store didn't have an instrument you wanted or desired, you could always order it through Sears or Montgomery Ward's. That was the internet of the day.
It was,
Right.
yes.
And my first drum set was a Montgomery Ward special,
Oh, my goodness.
$99. But I was cool because I was.
And
the
what
only
year
kid
was
in-
that?
In 1959.
See, that was a lot of money in those days.
It was, yeah. And luckily, most parents, it was like their chosen one was a part of a group. like the local athlete. You were kind of recognized as that, you know, similar
So you
to-
guys were cool because you played
Yeah,
musical instruments,
we were
right?
cool. And bands also had matching outfits. They had gimmicks to be recognized.
Still do today.
Yeah, it's true, and it helps because we would always come off circuit at 2 or 3 in the morning. You're at some Greasy Spoon restaurant, and you'd see a band come in because they're all dressed the same. Hey, where'd you play tonight? Did you get paid? How many fights broke out?
That's
You
the
know?
most important part. Did you get paid?
Yeah. And because of the given areas, it was not uncommon for cultural norms for fights to break out. The band
Not
kept
between
playing.
band members.
No,
The audience.
Yeah,
Okay.
they'd never mess with the band. We'd keep playing until things got subsided.
And just ignore what's going on
Somebody
in front of
call
you, right?
security. Yeah, right.
Where did these bands rehearse? I mean, was that kind of hard to find a place that would let you
Yeah.
come in and just, mess around till you got all the chords right and you were ready to perform?
Yeah. Well, most cases, that's a good point because rehearsal space was at a premium, but somebody in the band either had a friend or friends that had a key to a basement, for instance,
Sure.
Of mom and dad's place, or a garage, not in the wintertime, but in my case, lake cabin up in Minnesota.
Okay.
In the living room. In places that you could get a barn out at a farm, great place.
Practicing with the cows?
Oh, they loved it.
They didn't mind, right?
No, I didn't mind. So those were places that if you were lucky, and parents were agreeable too, you could rehearse at a given time in one of those places.
Wow. Well, when you were a part of the Palatins, just think about one special moment or maybe a favorite story that you can share with us about that time before we have to close.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, other than the drum rolling off the stage, that's always an impact in my mind.
What about the girls? I mean, all you guys, playing in a band, the ladies probably would come up and try to talk to you or make a date or...
Sure, yeah, you're right. And they would always want, in my case, broken drumsticks or some apparel from me, a button.
Souvenir, right?
Yeah, souvenir. That was not uncommon because a lot of the girls would show up by themselves without a date. And of course, a lot of the farm boys or some of the other guys would try to hit on them for a meet and greet kind of a thing. But no, that was important because for a lot of us, we were not the outgoing social types because we didn't have to initiate conversation. People
You
would
stood
come-
there and played, and they came to you.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
That's how it worked.
What you're such a fountain of information and knowledge. It's been like a time capsule of music the way it was in those decades.
Thanks.
What piece of advice could you give up and coming musicians? I mean, it's still as hard as ever to break into show business, to get notoriety, and we even have tools like the internet now, which helps a lot.
Yeah.
What would you say to up and coming musicians? What did you learn that is so important and integral to your life?
Well, there's a bunch of factors, but one is that there's so much stuff now as far as learning tools we didn't have. We had to learn from listening and getting stuff off records, whereas now you've got a lot of stuff on YouTube, a lot of lessons that kids can learn off YouTube, a lot
Self-taught.
of lesson books,
Sure.
self-progressed stuff with CDs, with the books, that kind of thing. As another impact, bands are a lot louder now than we were, and so hearing is a big issue. Hearing loss is a big issue in terms of the power and the volume that's being played by bands. So a lot of times, especially drummers, I would recommend getting some noise reduction headphones or something to plug into your ear because you're up against, and so is the singer, these big stack amps. We didn't have arena shows back in the day, when I was playing music. And so in an arena, you have to fill that arena up with sound, and
Sure.
it's loud.
Wow.
And it's a condition of employment.
I always ask everyone this because it's just so fascinating to hear them reflect on their own life. Is there anything that you wish you had done differently? If you could rewind and do it all again, what would you change and what would you not change?
Well, I wouldn't change my experience. You can learn so much just as opposed to learning from a classroom in civics or social studies, behavior patterns, that are out in the real world that you don't get in the classroom, right?
Oh, life skills?
Yeah,
we were
life-
just talking about that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Not to be redundant there, but that had such a big impact in terms of how you communicated with people, and how you addressed certain people in terms of communication. I wouldn't change that. You know,
You're
that's a
happy.
valuable lesson in itself.
Well, it's not every day I get to talk to a Mid-America Music Hall of Famer, so
You're very kind.
thank you so much for coming and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with us. It's been a delight. I hope we get to do it again soon.
We will.
For now, that's been another Morse Code musical adventure. We'll see you again real soon, I hope. Thank you, Maury.
Thank you. All right.
Moonlight and love songs never out of date. Hearts full of passion, jealousy and hate. A woman needs man, and man must have his mate that no one can deny.
It's still the same old story. A fight for love and glory.